Welcome to today's webinar, Teaching Opportunities in Higher Ed for EdD Graduates. Based on the overwhelming response we received, today's topic is clearly of great interest to our alumni and current students. Our panelists today represent a wide range of teaching opportunities and setting. Earlier today, I emailed all session registrants the bios for our speakers so you could learn more about their backgrounds and experience. It is our hope that this session will provide you with critical information to help you get started or further advance your teaching career in higher ed. As part of our preparation for this session, we reviewed the questions you submitted through the registration process and have incorporated many of them into the structured Q&A at the beginning of this session. We also encourage attendees to submit questions for our panelists. Please type your question in the Q&A box that can be accessed by clicking on the Q&A icon located on the menu bar. We have reserved time towards the end of the webinar for your questions and hope to get to as many as possible. Please note a recording of this webinar will be available in the next few days and a link will be sent via email to all attendees. And now I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session. Dr. Maria Ott earned her PhD from USC Rossier in 1994 and currently serves as a professor of clinical education at USC Rossier. At this point, I will turn the session over to you, Maria.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be part of this webinar, and special thanks to Matt DeGrush for organizing this important event. Clearly, this is a needed topic because so many of you are here today. So thank you, Matt. We appreciate your leadership in organizing today's event. Now you will meet our 4 panelists, and they will share their experiences and secrets with you. This is an opportunity to learn and grow as you navigate the pathways to higher education teaching opportunities. I'll introduce each panelist and then dive into our questions. You will learn more about each panelist as they respond to questions that came from those of you who submitted them. Let me begin by introducing Dr. Karen Escalante, who earned her EdD in 2016. She is the Assistant Professor, Cal State University, San Bernardino. Please join me in welcoming Karen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all.
Now let me introduce Dr. Ilin Magran. She earned her EdD in 2015, and she is currently an adjunct professor at the University of Verne. Please join me in welcoming Ilin. Our next panelist is Dr. Alberto Pimentel. He earned his EdD in 2018, and he is a tenure-track sociology professor at Los Angeles Harbor College. Join me in welcoming Alberto. And our 4th panelist is Patricia Dickinson, who earned her EdD in 2009, and she is Associate Professor at National University. Please join me in welcoming Patricia. We all are excited. There were a common theme among the questions you submitted in advance, and they revolved around how do you get your first teaching position when you don't have past experience? What are transferable skills, experiences, and other things to consider when building your CV for your first teaching position? Our 4 panelists have diverse experiences that led them to their current roles, and I look forward to having them share their pathways and how they overcame obstacles to land their first and subsequent positions. So we're going to start with Ilin. Ilin, for many people, their first teaching experience is an adjunct faculty role. Can you provide some insight into how you learned about and acquired past adjunct positions? And also, what are some challenges associated with being in an adjunct position? Ilin? Ilin, unmute yourself. Thank you.
I apologize. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Maria, for the warm welcome and introduction. So I always wanted to be part of giving back to the education. When I finished my degrees in Verne as a school counselor and a school psychologist, I always, there was this dream behind me that I wanted to give back and be one of the instructors, but of course I was focusing on my career. So when I landed a position in Glendale as an administrator, we started conducting a lot of threat assessment, suicide prevention. So I kind of became the expert in Glendale of putting kids on hold, sadly, providing support to our students, to our staff. Therefore, that became my baby. And so I was on the website at University of Verne one day, and I saw that they were looking for an adjunct professor. So I applied, and so there's areas that you can pick what classes you would like to do as part of the curriculum, and I chose the class that I'm good at. So I picked school safety and crisis prevention, and part of that is suicide prevention. How do you prepare your staff? What do you do before and after of a suicide? So it was so easy for me to teach that class, and I'll be very honest with you. And I have been teaching there for a few years now, but the first class that I was starting on a Saturday, I still didn't receive the book from Verne until 2 days before, and I was panicking. What am I going to do? This is my first time teaching. And I finished the book the night before, but it was what I did for a living. And that's what I do for a living. So it was so easy for me to give back. And when I was doing my EdD program with the USC, a couple of our professors, they didn't teach the book. They talked about their live experiences. They talked about, what do you do when you're a superintendent in this situation? And I always respected that aspect of teaching. And I mean, everybody can read and write an essay, but when you give back to your students the real experiences that you've gone through, I think it touches lives, and it means a lot. So that was my first class. I taught that, and my evaluations for my students were really extraordinary. And so Verne invited me back again as an adjunct. After that, I run an intern academy here in Glendale Unified. I have about 45 interns per year. They decided that they're going to give me a class that is a supervisor for interns as school counselors and school psychologists. So again, I did that very easily, teaching the class, giving back, and also stole all these interns. So I brought them to Glendale. So at one point, I had half of my interns from Glendale. And then I taught an ed psych class because I do have both psych and counseling experience. So that's about it. And I still continue to teach. At one point, I was teaching 3 classes a semester and conducting my full-time position here in Glendale. But right now, I'm only teaching 1 class at a time.
It was so important to hear you talk about those great evaluations you got for your first course, because clearly that opens doors for future opportunities. I'd like to ask if any of the other panelists would want to share the experience of having been in an adjunct role.
I'm happy to share. Thank you, Maria. So I have been an adjunct within the CSU system, and that was where I started out, and I'll be discussing that a little bit more. One of the challenges in being an adjunct is that oftentimes you're a little bit out of the loop at what is happening at the department level. And so I had to be really proactive to reach out to the chair, to reach out to tenured faculty and get more insight as to what was happening so that I could support new teachers, teacher candidates to the best of my ability. So you really have to advocate for yourself when you are an adjunct and make sure that you are in tune with what's happening within the programs you are teaching, because oftentimes it just happens that way, that oftentimes in programs, adjuncts don't get the full information that they need. And so it's so important for you to advocate in your role and for the students that you are serving.
That's such great advice. I'm thinking about an adjunct who is going to be teaching in the program I oversee, who has reached out to me to ask for early access to the readings, and also to make sure she has all the textbooks she needs. And I'm impressed by that, the fact that she's taking all that initiative. It speaks well of her commitment to be successful in the course. Anyone else want to speak about the adjunct experience before we, Alberto, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I spent about 6 years as an adjunct. This is actually my second year as a full-time instructor, and I had a 9-to-5 job prior to securing the full-time position. What I would like to encourage students to do when you're looking at faculty positions is to be open, to have a very diverse portfolio or resume. And what I mean by that is, if an opportunity exists, and I think Karen touched on this, you have to keep in contact with your chairs and individuals within your department. But if an opportunity exists and you have the time to do so, please pursue it. So if it's teaching a class that you never thought about teaching, and let me give you an example real quick. I never thought about teaching criminology. And then all of a sudden the opportunity came up. Hey, do you want to pick up a criminology class? I said yes. And so ultimately what happened is that over the course of those 6 years, I taught at 5 different colleges, and I taught about 5 or 6 different classes because I never said no to an opportunity. I never said no to a challenge. And so if you're looking to build your adjunct resume so you can prepare for a full-time position, I would say exhaust all opportunities that may exist. Thank you.
That's such important advice. And I'll pass it on to Patricia, but I just wanted to say that what Alberto commented on about taking that opportunity, even though you're super busy, if you want to get into this space, you don't want to pass up any opportunity. Patricia, please.
Hey everyone, I'm Patricia Dickinson. Sorry I joined late. So I'm an associate professor at Stanford College of Education. So I finished my program in 2009, and I probably spent 3 years as an adjunct. My first job was actually at the University of Phoenix. It was before I finished my doctorate. And it was a very structured, scripted curriculum. They were very much like on point with how many posts you had to do each week, how you responded to students. There was an intense amount of training. It was really intense, actually. And I was surprised because I had this perception about University of Phoenix. Anyways, it was a good learning experience, as Alberto shared. Everything is such, even it might not be a good fit. Like I would say in retrospect, it was not a good fit for me as an adjunct because I tend to be more creative and open-ended, and I like to have conversations with my students and engage with them. And there wasn't any of that. It was very, just kind of jumping through hoops and making sure that I was giving feedback in 24 hours. Like that's how I was evaluated. And then at the time I moved up to Northern California, and I was living in Monterey, and I really wanted to work at UCSC, University of California, Santa Cruz. So I made it a point, I would just move to the area, of actually going to any and all professional development that they were offering in their schools. So like their math talks, their, teacher trainings, they would do like monthly colloquiums where you just go and meet with the professors. And through that experience, I actually connected with Judith Moshkevich, who writes extensively about math instruction for ELLs. And she's like the guru there. Her and I had a relationship, and next thing you know, she invited me to teach her class because she was going on sabbatical. Well, what an amazing experience that was. And then from there, I was asked to teach at Rossier. I did that for a while, but then a full-time position opened up at National. So all of those things, as Alberto shared, is really kind of building a portfolio for you as an adjunct. And they're all wonderful learning opportunities. So network as much as you can. Don't say no to any opportunity that would open a door, even if it doesn't align with your personal philosophy. It's just a great way to get your foot in the door. And I would also recommend reaching out. I mean, I have to be honest with you, I hire teachers now. The people that I end up hiring are the ones that are constantly emailing me and sending me their resume and telling me what they're doing. And I'm like, wow, these are, for me, because I work in an online learning space, these are people that are showing me positive dispositions of what it's like to be an online instructor. So don't be afraid to, I know people are asking about like, oh, should I go to this job board or that job board? You can even just go onto their website and reach out to the professors, send them your resume, introduce yourself, kind of go old fashioned with networking.
That was such great advice from all of you. And Patricia added another dimension, which is sometimes you need to relocate to be able to get that perfect job. So, all of those factors that come into opening that door of opportunity. So let me now go on to Karen. For those in the audience who are interested in pursuing a full-time faculty position, what are the best ways to build your resume or CV to make you a strong candidate? Because these are highly competitive positions. Could you talk to that, please?
Thank you, Maria. So as I noted, I did start out, maybe I didn't note. I started out as TPA coordinator at CSU San Marcos. And I landed that position because when I was in my master's program, I continued to ask all my professors, what are some part-time positions in education? I had been teaching full-time in the classroom, but when I was working on my master's, I was home with my 1- and 2-year-old children. And so the master's allowed me to engage in adult conversation and get back into the profession. And so one of the things that I kept hearing about was, oh, you should look into becoming a teaching performance assessment assessor. And that was at the time through each different university in teacher education programs. And so I did that. And that was really how I got my foot in the door to higher ed. Following working for several universities as a TPA assessor, I was asked by Cal State San Marcos to take over as the teaching performance assessment coordinator, which was a full-time adjunct position. And it gave me a lot of insight into working in higher ed. While I was TPA coordinator at CSU San Marcos, I was also privy, and this is something that all of you can sign up for, is the PSD newsletter from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. They send an email out every Friday with multiple opportunities for all of you to become engaged in anything teacher education, which is what I am focused in. And so what happened is there was an opportunity that came up to be part of the redesigned Cal TPA design team. So there were 20 educators from the state of California selected. There were about 75 applicants. I was chosen to be part of that. And so for 2 years, I flew to Sacramento. It was through that opportunity that I made so many wonderful connections throughout the entire state of California. Connections that I continue to have this day. And I always believe that, there's the saying that who do you know, but rather it's who knows you. So when a organization is looking for someone, they kind of do a mental check. Who would be the person for this job? And they reach out to you. And I firmly believe in that still. So my suggestion as you are trying to get your foot in the door as an adjunct professor and then to a full-time tenured position is keep those connections open, as have been noted today. So when I did meet the individuals on the design team, who I have now presented at AERA with, AACTE, so many conferences in the States and in Canada as well, those connections have provided ongoing opportunities. And one of my connections recommended I become part of CCTE, which is the California Council on Teacher Education. And through that, I have been appointed the research chair. I applied to be on the board. Again, more networking. So if you are looking to, as Patricia noted, as Alberto noted, as you're looking to get your foot in the door, become affiliated with organizations. Sign up for the PSD newsletter that comes from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing every Friday. There are so many ways to become involved in that capacity. Volunteer. and then become involved in a few organizations that interest you. Having those things on my CV significantly helped when I went to apply for the position at CSU San Bernardino. I also knew a few people at the university because of the connections and the volunteer work that I had done throughout the state. So I can't underscore the connections. I do want to point out as well, and this was something we were just chatting about before the webinar started, is I am a huge believer in Twitter. The professional development on Twitter is nothing compares to it. You are privy to so many opportunities happening both within the state and within the United States and internationally. And it's another way to network and become engaged and involved in opportunities, and your name's out there. That was one thing that I, in one of my first positions, they said, "Oh, Karen, we keep hearing your name come up from other individuals." So I wasn't this unknown entity. My name had been thrown around in different circles of ways that I had been involved. So again, it's who knows you.
Wow, that was such powerful advice. It just made me think about the fact that as Trojans, we value those relationships and connections, and you really nailed it in terms of really developing those. These positions don't roll up to your door, right? You have to go out and it's heavy lifting. I mean, if you're really committed, you do the heavy lifting. Anyone else, can you share resume CV advice with our audience?
So what I wanted to share is I agree with all of our panelists. It's a combination of networking and of course not giving up. I know that a lot of people say that it's very difficult to get into teaching. Yes, it is, because you see that there's so many competitors. There's so many people out there with experiences, with their degrees, that you are competing for these jobs. But of course, you have to make sure that you're connected, to the university and not give up. And also what I heard from our panelists is that you can't be picky. So I remember when I started with University of Laverne, they have different clusters. I wanted to teach at Burbank because it's very close to my work and of course my residence. But they called me for an Orange County campus on a Saturday. Of course, did I want to teach on a Saturday? No. Did I want to drive to Orange County? No. But guess what? My answer was yes, I'll take it. So anything that they gave me and any opportunity when I received a call and email, I said yes. I never said no. So they already knew that University of Laverne, that anytime that they reach out to Ilin, she's not going to say no. So you have to make sure that you're not limiting yourself. And of course, when the opportunities come to you, please say yes if that's what you want to do. And gradually, when I started and they saw my work and my evaluations, I did put in a request to teach at a closer campus, which is Burbank, and that's where my home is. So it really works out for me and both the university. But yeah, and of course, when you are out there looking for a job, don't be limited to what you would want to teach. Teach whatever is within your area. As I said, school safety and crisis prevention was one that I could teach closing my eyes. It's very easy, 2-unit class, and it's what I do, what I've been doing for the past 10 years here in Glendale. But I didn't limit myself. When they called me for ed psych, I said, I'll do it. When they called me for supervision, I'll do it. Of course, there's always a class that you're really passionate about, which for me is suicide prevention, to give back because I know the ins and outs. But, I put myself out there every time there was an opportunity. Thank you.
What you shared is so important because that you were building your resume. I could just see your resume growing as you were going through all those experiences and opportunities you accepted. That's how you build it. So thank you so much. I'm going to move us on and I'm going to direct this next question to Alberto. Alberto, you've spent a number of years teaching in the community college system. Can you share with us some insights on finding positions, getting hired, and advancing your teaching specifically within community colleges?
Definitely. Thank you for the opportunity. A lot of times individuals don't realize how competitive the community college system is when it comes to hiring. You can have one position open up after a 6-year gap. I serve on the Faculty Hiring Priorities Committee. We just met last week, and we have a position that hasn't been filled in 32 years. And so you want to take that into consideration, that when you're applying for a full-time faculty position at a community college, you're competing against hundreds of individuals. Unless that position is very specific, then you may be competing against 50 individuals. I wanted to make note that when you're applying to community colleges especially, and I think this is applicable to other post-secondary institutions as well, there are some key terms that you want to focus on as you're going through that process. And you want to focus on student success, student retention, and student equity. And when you're applying to these jobs, your CVs want to reflect those 3 concepts. You want to make sure that your background, as far as the committees you've served on, past job experience, as well as your teaching resume, properly illustrate those 3 components. So when it comes to applying to a community college, or I would say any post-secondary institution, I always tell students, go directly to the source, go directly to the website. I can tell you this, over the 6 years that it took for me to get a full-time position, I was obsessed. Every single week, I was looking at the LA Community College District website, I was looking at the Rio Hondo College website, and so on and so forth. And so when those job opportunities popped up, I applied immediately, because I said to myself, I'm not going to allow this position to pass me by. And so when you're looking and you're applying to these positions, what you need to realize is that there are specific needs for each community college, and to assume that all community colleges are the same is wrong. When you write your CV, when you're applying to these positions, look at the student demographics. Look at the programs that are in existence and those programs that don't exist. And I'll give you a quick example of that. When I was hired as a full-time professor at Los Angeles Harbor College, I was also hired the week before as a full-time professor at Rio Hondo College. And when I went into the interview at Rio Hondo College, I had memorized all the statistics of the college. I had already been teaching there for about 1.5 years. So I knew what the organizational deficiencies were. And I also went in with a game plan of how I was going to fill those deficiencies. Granted, it's a very structured environment, so you have to work those responses into whatever answers you're providing to the 6 or 7 questions that they're providing you with. When I went into the interview at Los Angeles Harbor College, because I had been there for 6 years already, I made sure to list my entire resume as I was going through my 15-minute presentation, and as I was answering each question individually. I talked about my work on the curriculum committee and how I'd use that experience to build a social work and a sociology program at LA Harbor College. I talked about my work with the Dreamers committee and with different scholarship organizations on campus, so that I can show how I was focused on student success and student equity. And when it came to retention, I talked about how my previous background as a high school counselor and also university advisor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, helped me provide academic guidance and mentorship to my students. And so that's what makes you stand out, because typically what happens is that a lot of individuals may be fresh out of college. They may not have these really impressive resumes. And as you're serving it as an adjunct, as I mentioned before, you want to build that resume so that you go in and they say, how is this person not a full-timer already? We've seen you at this committee, we've seen you at this committee, we've seen you at that committee. In addition to that, what I started, and I love what Karen said about Twitter, right? Very, very popular. I created an Instagram, Soch Talk with the Doc, because I teach sociology. And I post campus events, scholarship opportunities, fun things about my classes. And so when I went in for my interview, I was able to talk about how I use technology in my classrooms, or during my lectures. And that carried a lot of weight as well. People were nodding, people were excited about that. And so that's really how you begin to stand out when you're applying and you're competing against so many individuals. Thank you.
It was just really powerful the way you described how you built, in a sense, you built opportunities to shine so others could see your abilities. Someone didn't come and ask you to do some of those things. You created them on your own. I wonder if anyone else wants to share something that is relevant here and would help our audience understand about building up their resume. Karen.
I thank you, Maria. I want to point out something Alberto mentioned as he was applying to the different programs. He did his homework about each university to which he was applying. That is so significant. When I went in for my job talk to you at CSU San Bernardino, to be able to mention the demographics of the community, to be able to mention the mission, to be able to mention the vision, and how my research and how my work aligned with that. That has to be modified for each university to which you are applying. We can never copy and paste. You've got to do your homework. I researched everyone on the search committee, so I knew what their research was as well, so that when I went for my on-campus interview, I already knew who was on the search committee and what they were studying, because that lends itself to those conversations. So just to hit on Alberto's point about doing your homework about the individual programs, universities, et cetera, to which you are applying is so significant.
It just underscores what you need to do in a really highly competitive field. But if you really have this goal, you're all of you in the audience, you're hearing the secrets and good advice from those who have gone before you. So anyone else on the panel want to add to that before we move on to our next question?
So
Ilin?
I just want to add to, Karen and what Alberto shared. For me, working in K-12 at a school district and of course wanting to teach and be an adjunct, I thought I wanted to do something more than just being in a box and be a coordinator or currently director here. So I'm one that anybody who's worked with me knows that I don't say no. I'm not sure if that's my strength or my weakness, but that's just what I do. So in the past 10 years, I've served on numerous boards here in Glendale. So CV Alliance was one that started years ago up the hill, and the community was really involved in students who were engaged in drugs and alcohol. And of course, my expertise came in that. So I was a board member there. Just get the community to know you, because you never know who in the community will make a reference and will recommend you for a position or any kind of event. Then from there, I went to the Police Foundation. The Police Foundation was looking for, here in Glendale, a board member. They called me. I said yes. I didn't even look to see what days they're meeting. I said, I'll make it happen. And then from there, I went to Glendale Youth Alliance. I'm currently a board member on all of these. And Glendale Youth Alliance serves our students here in Glendale with job opportunities, whether you're foster homeless or any, they support us deeply. So I'm part of their board, and the fire department is next. They've approached me, but of course we hit the pandemic, so I stopped and I haven't outreached to them yet. So it is very important and be part of. And of course, I served on the Commission of Status of Women here in Glendale, and I recently resigned because it was just getting too much, but I served on their board for 2 years. I think that, doing what you do, continue contributing to the community and wherever you are, but of course do a little bit more than what you're assigned to do, and have people get to know your work. And I think your work will speak to themselves, whether it's keeping your connections at the university or in your community or your organization.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to listen to all of you. You're making an impact, and I think that's what when institutions of higher ed are hiring, they're looking for people who are going to make an impact. They're looking for that extra that you bring that would really enrich their program. Patricia, anything you would want to add?
I want to say that for all of these wonderful things that you're hearing, there's been hundreds of failures, hundreds of rejections, and hundreds of doors that have been closed. So even though you're hearing all these great things that we've done, realize that there's a whole continuum of failure and closed opportunities and things that we've wanted to have and haven't gotten. So don't be afraid of rejection. That you have to get over. That's number one. And number two is go for everything and anything that comes your way.
Great advice, Patricia. I've always thought that your strength only grows when you have faced adversity, and rejection's part of that. But it's, you keep going and you're stronger for each of those experiences. So the next question I have is for Patricia. Patricia, your role at National University is different in a few ways than the other panelists, given the structure and mission of your institution. Can you share with us how these differences play a role in the recruitment and hiring of faculty?
Well, I've been at National since 2012, and I work in teacher credentialing. So as I shared, somebody had asked a question about getting a job. You know, I hire and staff math methods and science methods. So for me, I prefer to have people that have experience. You know, as you guys already know out there, curriculum is constantly changing. The classrooms are changing. So having relevancy is so critical. You know, how can you prepare students, or how can you prepare teacher candidates for the classroom if you have no experience teaching Common Core math, or you have no experience, you know, doing things like Genius Hour or design thinking or STEM or STEAM, which are all hot topics right now. So I think one of the bits of advice that I got early on in my career, because I'm a little scatterbrained, like a lot of professors out there. If you go to my desk, it's like so much going on, it's explosion, is find a niche. Get really specific with your expertise and hone in on it. Even if it's just a blog and you just start blogging and you just start sharing that on Twitter. I mean, I have to be honest with you guys. I didn't even apply for the job at National. They found me. I was so busy doing like professional development for schools and consulting with ed tech firms and just kind of out there, that one day I just got a call from them. I was like, I don't even think I applied there. So, you know, just do you and do your passion, and things will fall into place, and trust the process. I think, you know, we get so worried about like the future that we forget to live in the moment. And part of why we enter this profession, the teaching profession, is because we love teaching. We love working with kids. We love sharing our, you know, our interest in our inspiration with others. So, you know, that kind of was how I landed on, or they found me at National. And I've been there and worked in different capacities, but, you know, I was very fortunate that they didn't really have any math science people. So I kind of just fell into that role. And from there, I actually wrote a book, which has been adopted at several different universities. So, you know, and people were like, why are you doing this? What are you doing? I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. And I'm going to do me. And I'm going to do what I'm passionate about. And people are going to notice that. So don't worry about trying to fit into a mold. Just do your passion. So here's my first book I wrote. And then my second book I wrote was this baby right here, which I love because I'm very passionate about teaching online. And this one in math and technology, this is the virtual classroom book. But I even started just writing in IGI, which is another wonderful publication. And I noticed that there was a huge gap between teacher ed and special ed. And I was like, oh my God, we have to talk about this, because we're talking about inclusion practices, but teacher ed and special ed don't work together. So I became the editor of this book. So, you know, things like that. Find your passion. Don't do it for the fame and glory. Do it for the passion that's in your heart. And then everything else will fall into place. That's my advice.
Patricia, as you were searching for your books, I was getting an image of that office that you were describing that's full of all kinds of things going on. Thank you. You're such an impressive panel, and you've been so open and honest with our audience and giving them a lot of secrets that I know they're going to use, hopefully to advance their personal agendas and goals. And so thank you for that. If I were in the audience here, I'd want to be hanging out with all four of you because you have so much advice that's really valuable. So let me, before we move to the audience questions, are there any additional thoughts you'd like to share regarding your experience teaching in higher ed that we haven't covered? Anyone on the panel?
I would just offer, once you do land that position in higher ed, continue on that trajectory. Sorry, I couldn't say that at the moment. It doesn't stop once you land there. There are so many new exciting things to then take on once you are in that role. So I think as educators, we all follow the philosophy of lifelong learners, and that our continuum is never complete. We are always on that lifelong continuum of learning, growing, developing, etc. So once you do land at that fabulous position that you are attempting to get, continue.
That's great. Thank you.
If I can, what I would encourage individuals to do is, as we've mentioned before, the power of networking and how that impacts your ability to be hired. But also, networking helps in your establishment within your institution as an individual that people go to for assistance and support. And what I mean by that is, in February of last year, this was within my first year of teaching full time, I launched the Higher Education Leadership Empowerment Network. It's called the Helen Program with the Viterbi School of Engineering at USC with President Emeritus Nikias. And when we were putting this program together, and our first cohort met about a month and a half ago, when we were putting together this cohort of student leaders from the community college to take classes at USC, I made sure to put together an advisory council. And my advisory council is predominantly adjunct counselors and adjunct faculty. And the reason I did that was not only to empower and create opportunities for others, but in addition to that, I understood that on your college campuses, they're identifying who are the team players, who is focused on creating a better campus environment and better culture. And what that ultimately led to was not only maintaining my full-time position, but also now getting me appointed to become the co-director or co-coordinator, I should say, of distance education for the entire college. I didn't have any background in distance education outside of teaching one class online. But it was the power of networking, it was the power of relationships. And so I want to encourage all of you, when you get that full-time position, continue to be hungry, right? Don't become complacent. A lot of times we see that taking place, and it's going to create more and more opportunities for you later on, because you're not just a professor or instructor. You could be a professor, instructor, and such. Thank you for the time.
That's great. Great advice. Thank you, Alberto. Anyone else with anything we've missed? Because I'm going to move then to questions that have come in from the audience. There have been a lot of questions about resumes, and I know you've addressed like what to, how to build that experience base to be competitive. But what advice would you provide in how to structure and format your resume or CV? What is the best way to present your background in the application process? Anyone want to provide some advice on that one?
I'll start. So obviously you want it to be pleasing to the reader. So it needs to, just the structure of it needs to be legible, readable, not too overwhelming. So those are just, some initial structural pieces. One of the things that I have done in my CV is I start with the positions that I've had. I then move into publications, and then I have listed out all the presentations and/or professional development opportunities. I try to keep it as simple as possible to read, but also make sure to identify all those things that you have been involved in. I have asked colleagues over the years to look at my CV, again, for that readability piece. Is it clear? Is it overwhelming? Is it confusing? Because that can make a significant difference when you send your CV to someone. If it's not legible for a variety of reasons, that can impact how you are perceived, and if they don't understand fully what you have been engaged in. So I try and keep it as clean and neat as possible. And I consistently, at least once a week, go back into my CV and edit, modify, update, etc., so that it's not a year down the road and I'm panicked because an opportunity has come up and my CV is not relevant. So at least once a week, I'm in there updating, modifying, etc., so that it's always available to send to whomever when something comes along.
Karen, that is such great advice. I can't tell you times where I've found myself wishing I had done that once a week, updating. Really great advice. Anyone else want to add to that? Because there's a related question here that builds on that question, and it says, what role can research and publications play in making you more marketable for faculty positions? Anyone want to take that one on?
Sure, I think I've been answering some questions in the chat. So as Karen shared, having it nice and clean and well organized is critical. And so I think when I started my CV, I actually asked Dr. Robert Ueda, who's now Professor Emeritus, can you please share your resume? And he sent his vita to me. I think it was about 60 pages. And I was like, oh my God, this man is so accomplished. I felt so overwhelmed. However, I have to say, after being in this profession for over 10 years, I'm now up to 12 pages, everyone. So, organizing it, obviously you have your educational preparation at the top, your contact information, your credentials, grants and awards. That's really important if you are looking for like a Research One institution, anything that you've been involved in for grants and awards, anything that you've received. And I don't think we talked about this, but I am a huge fan of AERA. And I think if you haven't gone, you need to go. It is just a wonderful networking opportunity, but it's also such a great space to kind of get into the research and get involved in the profession as a person in higher education. You need to start there, and there's different organizations and committees that you can get involved with. And then I share my professional experiences with just the date and the title. Then any professional affiliations. So again, finding your niche. Mine's math and technology. So I have ISTE, AERA, ASCD, NCTM, CCTE. And then, as I shared in the chat, being a reviewer for those professional organizations, that's something that you can get started with. You can be a reviewer. Every year I do AERA. I review their conference proposals, their calls, and I learned so much about how to write a conference proposal. The first 2 years I got rejected, and I was like, that's it, I'm done. And then I signed up to be in their mentor program. So I was a mentee. I had a mentor. She reviewed my proposal and told me exactly what I needed to do. And every year since then, I get accepted. So mentorship is so critical. So find, if you are in Pi Delta Kappa, or CCTE also has mentorship programs, AERA, get into a mentorship program. It's free, and you'll get advice from somebody that has experience doing this. So that's a wonderful opportunity. I did that both for AERA and CCTE. I was a mentee. And then listing your publications. I shared IGI is how I got started as a reviewer. And then I submitted some call for proposals to write book chapters. And then just from there, doing journal articles, and then writing my own book from there, just going for it. So that's kind of organization. And typically, universities are looking for three things. They're looking for scholarship, service, and teaching. So if you can organize like that, and I added my email, if you guys want, I'll be more than happy. You can look at my Vita, you can copy the format. Just send me an email and I'll send it to you all.
Patricia, that's so great. I know that one of the best ways to learn how to improve your own document is to look at one that's well done. So thank you for that. Also wanted to say that AERA is such a tremendous resource, and you all, those in the audience, I hope all of you take that to heart. It's an amazing organization that connects scholars on every topic that is important to us as educators. So take advantage of that. I remember when I was fresh out of the doctoral program myself and had the opportunity to go, I was so overwhelmed with the just interfacing with people who were the authors of the books that I had in my courses, or who had, you know, scholarly work that I had read. So encourage everyone to consider that. There's a related question that came in. It deals with some of what you've talked about. What are your tips for networking specifically to help increase your chances to learn about and get hired for teaching positions? Many of you have mentioned that, the importance of networking, but could you be real concrete about how the audience might go about increasing their skill set at networking? Anyone want to take that on first?
I'll start first if that's okay. And so, yes, I recommended earlier that you join organizations, and I know Patricia, Alberto, and Ilin all mentioned this as well, but putting yourself out there within organizations, whether it's a local organization, whether it's a state organization, whether it's a national organization, that is the best way to start to get to know people and attend the meetings, attend the presentations. I'm the type of person where I listen first, because I like to know who am I in the room with, what's kind of the vibe, what's happening here before I start offering my suggestions and ideas. That's me personally. I like to listen, hear what others are saying, and then offer my insights. And then, I mean, even in this Zoom environment, the opportunity to still have personal connections, engagements, discussions, etc., is a wonderful way. And as I noted, one of the best things I did is become part of the TPA design team. And again, I found out about that through the PSD newsletter, the Professional Services Division newsletter. It's emailed every Friday from the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And to Maria's point, through that work, I got to present at AERA with Linda Darling Hammond. And I mean, talk about pinching myself. I had read all her work through my EdD program, and the opportunity to present with her was something I'll never forget. And then she actually just presented at the CCTE conference a few weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to be on the panel and ask her questions. So another amazing opportunity. So put yourself out there consistently through different organizations. I volunteered, or I participated in AACTE's Day on the Hill recently. I got to meet Kamala Harris's staff member. I invited her to my class. She came, she spoke to all my students. I'm still in communication with her now. I'm claiming her as my BFF, because how incredible is this? But continually putting yourself out there. When something comes up, seek it out. I sign up for stuff all the time, whether I can attend or not, because it's being on those mailing lists and participating when the opportunity presents itself.
I loved what you said about joining, but you also made a comment about showing up, even though you may not be able to be there 100%. People who sign up and then don't make the effort, and I think sometimes it's because people don't feel comfortable walking into a room where they don't feel they know anybody. but all of us were there, right? We all had to walk into that room where we didn't know anybody and go up and introduce ourselves and get to know people. And then you're rubbing shoulders with people like Glenda Darling Hamlin or the new vice president. So anyone else want to add to that conversation? Alberto?
One of the things that I did early on in my career, and I'm a product of East Los Angeles Community College, born and raised. And when I first got hired at LA Harbor College, it's kind of funny how I got hired. I had just returned from Vegas, and I was working at a high school as an director of admissions. And I contacted one of my former professors from Dominguez Hills, and I said, "Hey, I'm back in LA. Just want to give you my LA number." He said, "Dude, get to LA Harbor right now." I'm like, "Where's LA Harbor? I had never been to San Pedro." And he said, "Go." He's like, "I got you an interview." And so I said, "Okay, great." So I get that teaching position. It was one class, and I think I maintained one class for like a year and a half. But what I started to do is when I would look at different events that are happening on campus, regardless of whether or not, I had any connection to that event, I made business cards. And the business cards didn't say, LA Harbor College. The business cards just had my name, my email address, my phone number, and my degrees, and what that degree was in. And so when I met like the chancellor of the community college district, I handed him my business card. I met the deans, whoever I met, I handed them a business card. And I made sure that every event that I saw them at after that, I walked up, I introduced myself again, I shook their hand. And what was amazing about that is fast forward a year and a half into my teaching career, all of a sudden I start getting contacted by LA Southwest College, East Los Angeles College. And in the district, you could teach 3 classes. That's the max for adjuncts. Early on, I was able to max out my 3 classes, bouncing between 3 different colleges because of that networking. And then later on, it elevated to the point where I was able to teach 3 classes just at one college, and then 3 classes at Rio Hondo as well. So I was teaching full time at both. The other thing I would recommend is take that leap of faith. Pick up the phone. Don't send an email. They get a million emails, and I'm exaggerating with a million, but they get a ton of emails with people asking, are you hiring? Make a phone call, stop by their office hours and say, "Hey, my name's such and such. I have a degree in such and such. I'm currently working in such and such field, even if it's not education related, but I want to be an instructor. I want to be a professor. Can you tell me how?" And I can tell you that my first interview ever, based on my connection with my former professor, the guy looked at me, the department chair looked at me and said, "Look," I think it was, now it's been like 30 something years, but at that time, 26 years ago, I had no teaching experience and someone took a gamble on me. So I'm going to take a gamble on you. Make me proud. And fast forward now, going into my 8th year at that institution. So all it takes is, expressing people that you want to teach and having the courage to walk up and introduce yourself. Thank you.
I think our audience is hearing the passion that all of you bring to the work you do, and it's powerful, and I'm sure is motivating them, and perhaps the secrets that you're sharing with them will help them get that first opportunity. There's one question I think that we have to acknowledge, and that deals with the pandemic and how that has impacted faculty hiring. I'm thinking that when we were starting earlier today and talking to Matt about how the virtual world that we're now living in has opened up opportunities, right? So clearly the pandemic in terms of health issues is powerful and impactful, but also it's opened up some new realities, like being able to have this particular webinar that we have people from all over the country attending. So anybody want to talk about what the faculty hiring and the pandemic?
There's a position at CSU San Bernardino right now in the Teacher Education Foundation, so please feel free to apply. It's for math and sciences, working in single and multiple subjects. So I've shared this on my Twitter feed. You can also find it on the Cal State San Bernardino website, but we currently have a position that we are flying, so apply.
So hiring is still happening, at least at Karen's institution. Anyone else have any insights into hiring in this time of pandemic?
We just filled up a position at National in SEL. So they're still hiring for adjuncts. So if you have a focus on social emotional learning, there's adjunct positions in that area at National University. So definitely there's opportunities out there. I think we shared like Prof Higher Ed is a good website, Insight Higher Ed. LinkedIn is also huge. I mean, you could even get tons of consulting jobs through LinkedIn. So all of those network places are really important. And yeah, I know we're hiring there at National too. So
Alberto.
So I can tell you that the district, the Los Angeles Community College District, which is one of the largest districts in the United States, we just went through the process of, I guess you call it the golden handshake. And so we have a lot of individuals who are in the process of retiring at the conclusion of this year, not the academic year of 2020. I know on our campus, and we're considered the second smallest community college at, I believe, just under 9,000 students. We have 23 individuals retiring. 8 of them are faculty members. And in addition to that, our presidents are also retiring. And so there are a lot of opportunities that are going to exist throughout the district. And I would say, once again, have that obsession, go to the websites consistently, start putting in phone calls or email addresses or LinkedIn messages to the chairs of those departments. As I mentioned before, I'm on the Faculty Hiring Priorities Committee, and I was actually, not to show too many details, but I was actually going through my list earlier of the positions that we need to fill. And a lot of these positions, I can tell you, are counselors. And counselors can also be considered faculty members at the community college. You will teach a class or two. And so now is the time to start getting in contact with individuals if you want to teach at the community college level.
Maria, can I add one? I'm sorry. Can I add one more thing? I was thinking enrollment is up across the CSU, the entire CSU system. Enrollment is up. This pandemic has encouraged individuals to go back to school. Our enrollment within teacher education programs across the CSU is up. As such, CSU programs are needing lecturers, they're needing supervisors. So that's your foot in the door, friends. That's an opportunity. So seek out those opportunities because, again, we're seeing increased enrollment across California. I can't speak for the entire nation, but I know in California, we're seeing increased enrollment, which is going to mean more opportunities for part-time positions. So keep an eye out, make your connections, work the networking, and land those positions.
It's great to know and remind the audience that bubbles happen, right? You get these retirements and new opportunities for those of you who are ready to step in. And we have one question that talks about when you step in. So how much guidance, if you get that first chance, do you receive in your first teaching position in terms of curriculum, the syllabus, assignments, and other things related to teaching that first course? And maybe Ilin, you would want to start this one off.
Sure. So I remember the first class that I was going to teach at University of La Verne, which was the school safety class. With University of La Verne, they will not let you teach a class, although you're an expert in that field, unless you shadow an instructor. And this was a few years ago. So every week I would attend the class and kind of co-teach the class with the instructor. And I learned a lot. They do support you with the syllabus, with of course the book, I saw who the instructor brought as presenters to the class, and I was able to utilize some of those presenters when I did my teaching in Burbank. But yeah, they did a lot of not hand-holding, but you shadowing an instructor, an adjunct professor, really supports you, especially that you've never been a classroom teacher before, and I've never had that experience before, so that helped me dramatically.
That's great. Thank you, Eileen. How about Alberto? Did you have a lot of help when you started out, or were you on your own?
So as an adjunct, I was kind of on my own, mostly because I was working as a counselor during the day at a high school and teaching in the evening. And when I would walk into the office, nobody was there. And I think the only time I would connect with individuals is basically when they called me and say, hey, can you teach this class? When I became a full-time instructor, I can tell you that there are 3 individuals, one in history, actually 2 in history and 1 in psychology, who took me under their wing. And they taught me the politics of the institution. They gave me some insight into this is how you're going to get on the on this committee or that committee. They actually wanted to throw me into the water right away, so I learned how to swim. And they put me on the academic senate. And if anyone's ever been on the academic senate, it is brutal, right? It's a brutal environment, but you learn how to negotiate within the organization, and you learn about who are the key players within that organization who may not hold the title of dean, VP, or president. And so what I learned from that and that experience so far has been extremely helpful in launching programs outside of, but that are connected to LA Harbor. But in addition to that, launching degree programs and learning how to negotiate with individuals, saying, well, can we substitute this for this? In addition, what I did and what I recommend doing for individuals is go and meet people outside of your division and get to know the counselors. Because if you get to know the counselors, they will tell you exactly what the students' needs are. And if they really like you and they know that you're a good instructor, your classes will fill up immediately at the beginning of every semester, right? And so you have to be very strategic in that sense. But yeah, great mentors. If you don't have one, you have to seek one out on whatever campus you're at.
Great advice, Alberto. And I would imagine you're an awesome mentor to those that have reached out to you as well, and they're fortunate to learn from you. Karen, any advice from you on that topic of starting out and the support?
Yes, thank you. So as I noted earlier, you really are, it's sink or swim sometimes when you are an adjunct. And so that's where I said you need to be an advocate for yourself. Tenured faculty, the chair, the dean won't necessarily reach out to you. You've got to do the reaching out to them, which as a tenure line faculty member, I appreciate when adjuncts are seeking clarification and wanting to know what's in alignment with our program so that they can be on the same path, and that there's not a discrepancy in what's being taught with core faculty versus adjuncts. And so be an advocate, maintain those lines of communication, and to Alberto's point, find a mentor. I was consistently checking in with mentors that I have developed over the years and continue to do so as I grow in my profession, but be an advocate for yourself.
Thank you. And a final word on this question as we wrap up from Patricia. Anything you want to share about that, the support you got as a brand new faculty member?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the institution. They're very different. So when I was at UCSC, I definitely got a lot of support from Dr. Moshevitz because, I had made a personal connection with her. But, at National, it's very different. The courses are already created, the full-time faculty write the courses. So, you're kind of stepping into a course that's already been crafted, and really it's about teaching the course with fidelity. I know that word kind of gets a lot of play, but I encourage my adjuncts to to infuse their own personal experiences and their work in the field during their synchronous meetings and through course announcements so that they can get that personal touch. And I think that really helps because it is a huge lift, especially at a university like National. I mean, you're teaching an entire methods course in 4 weeks. And that has been a huge challenge, I think, in terms of the pandemic. I have obviously, you know, for me, I have 3 kids at home. I'm home Zooming that are here right now with me, that are in the other room, that are well trained. But we have to have grace for our students too, because they're also working full time, or they may have kids at home that they're supporting with remote teaching. So I have encouraged my adjuncts as, you know, the lead faculty in the courses to give students grace, because we're all going through so much right now, social emotionally, that we need to be flexible and we need to connect on that basic level, kind of think of, you know, Maslow hierarchy of needs and get to that. So I think as an adjunct, that's really where the rubber meets the road is, you know, is having those personal relationships is going to pay in dividends in terms of getting positive reviews. So just like if you're in a traditional classroom, your first day of school, you might greet your students at the door, you might shake their hands. Well, what does that look like when you're teaching online? You know, are you sending in an announcement? Like I use cute Bitmojis, I'll call my students. Sometimes I'll do a video announcement so they can see my bubbliness. So all of those things really, really help. I initially, when I started a blog, I started a YouTube channel. I shared, if you guys want to be on my podcast, I'd love for you to get on my podcast, talk about your expertise, all of those things, even though like initially you're like, this seems like so much work and I'm in the mud, they have a ripple effect. So put in the work now, even though you might not see like the financial dividends, but over time, it has a ripple effect and you will have a ripple effect and get where you want to be. So don't be afraid to take chances. And the most important thing, just like if you're teaching K-12 or adult learners, are those relationships with your students. So if you have a student who's not participating, reach out, give them a call, ask them how you can support them, things like that. That's what really matters.
Thank you. What an amazing panel. I mean, all of you added so much personal insight and also, you know, really opened up to be generous in sharing what you did. And I can't thank you enough on behalf of our audience. You know, my favorite word, awesome. You're awesome, all of you. And you opened up, I think, doors of thinking and opportunity for our audience. And I hope that they will follow up. And I'm going to turn this back to Matt. I will ask Matt to also include in the information that goes out to our participants today, the audience, a link to the hiring website at Rossier, because that's how you find out about positions at USC Rossier. You do it through a website and you can search for the School of Ed for Rossier on that. So he'll be sending that to you. Matt, again, thank you for putting this together and thank you to our amazing panel. I'm hearing loud, thunderous applause from the audience. Matt.
Great, thank you. And I just want to reiterate everything that Maria said about the panel. You guys were amazing, awesome. The question and answer box was lighting up with questions. I know you guys were going in there and answering questions for people, and that was great. I also want to thank you, Maria, for moderating and managing the discussion so well. You're such a great moderator, and I thank you for taking time out to help with this particular session. I do want to point out that you know, you will have the contact information for all of the speakers, and I encourage you to reach out to them. So many of the questions that we got in advance and as well as in the Q&A box are very unique to people's situations. And, you know, while it's hard to answer those types of questions in this setting, our panelists are more than happy to hear from you and help answer those questions that may be specific to your particular situation, whether it's your background or what you're interested in getting into. So you will have their email addresses if you haven't seen them already. In the follow-up email I'll be sending out with the recording of today's session. So again, I encourage you to reach out to our speakers. Also, when you close out of the session today, a short survey will appear. I would love to get your feedback on today's session, as well as your thoughts on future virtual programs. And I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all for attending. Have a great day and fight on.
Fight on, everyone.